So, good morning. Today I am going to take a class on venous thromboembolism. So, venous thromboembolism will be taught under these headings, that is definition of venous thromboembolism, etiology, epidemiology, clinical feature, investigation and treatment of venous thromboembolism. So, by definition, venous thromboembolism is a formation, development or existence of a blood clot or thrombus within the venous system. So, venous thromboembolism includes deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism. The most common type of venous thromboembolism is deep vein thrombosis, which occurs in the deep veins within the muscles of leg, arm, or pelvis. This venous thromboembolism is one of the most common complications of hospitalized patients. So coming to the deep vein thrombosis. So by definition, deep vein thrombosis is a formation of blood clot in one of the deep veins of body, usually in the lower limb, that is in the legs. If you take the epidemiology of deep vein thrombosis, 1 out of 4 patients admitted for general medical condition to the hospital will develop a deep vein thrombosis. If you take the incidence in the Indian population, it varies from 8 to 28 in the hospitalized patient. In that, 50 to 60% of the patients, those who are undergoing a hip or knee surgery, are more prone to develop a deep vein thrombosis. So come to the etiology or risk factor or predisposing factor for this deep vein thrombosis or pulmonary embolism. So more than 100 years ago, Barque described the three broad category of factor that brought to the contribute in the formation of thrombosis. One is venous stasis, second one is endothelial damage, third one is hypercoagulable state. All these factors will lead to the development of thrombosis in the various part of the body. So venous stasis, what are the conditions that result in venous stasis? That is prolonged bed rest or bedridden patient, usually 4 days or more, or those who have patient with a cast in the leg following a fracture of the limbs, either upper limb or lower limb, or following a stroke or spinal cord injury will result in the limb paralysis that result in immobility of the limb or extend travel in a vehicle. Second important thing is hypercoagulable states, usually malignant disease, drugs, those who are taking a estrogen, oral contraceptive for a longer duration, pregnancy, dehydration, polycythemia, nephrotic syndrome, ulcerative colitis, and lupus anticoagulant. Some inherited coagulate defects also will predispose to the development of deep vein thrombosis or pulmonary embolism. That is antithrombin 3 deficiency, protein C and S deficiency, factor 5 Leiden mutation, anticardiolipid antibody, and also increase in age. Third and most important thing that causes or predisposed to development of DVT or pulmonary embolism is endothelial damage, either due to trauma or during surgery, and invasive procedure usually may disturb venous integrity. Some of the iatrogenic causes of venous thrombosis are increased due to the widespread use of central venous catheter, particularly subclavian or intrajugular line, So this line usually important cause for upper extremity DVT, particularly in the children. So coming to the clinical feature of deep vein thrombosis. So many patients will have a asymptomatic. So in majority of the cases, usually one limb is affected, either right lower limb or left lower limb. However, in the rare cases, both the limb may have a DVT. So patient usually present a unilateral swelling of limb and also complaints of a pain. On examination, there is a tenderness will be there. Swelling below the knee in the distal deep vein thrombosis and up to the groin in the proximal deep vein thrombosis. On examination, skin over the leg usually feel warm. So look for the redness, warm and tenderness of calf compression. That is called Moses sign. Homan sign is pain in the posterior calf or knee with a forced dorsiflexion of the foot while the knee is fully extended. So this is not commonly used test and should not be done also. So less commonly used today because they potentially dislodge the deep vein thrombus and travel to the lung. So there is a more chances of developing a pulmonary embolism if you do this test. A severe form of a deep vein thrombosis, patient will have present a phlegmatia cerelia dolens, that is cyanotic form of massive iliofemoral venous thrombosis. Second one is phlegmatia alba dolens. It's a white from massive iliofemoral along with arterial compression or spasm. So this is a picture showing a phlegmatia cerelia dolens where there is a marked edema, painful and cyanotic. Petechiae is seen over the which limb is affected with deep vein thrombosis. This is the another picture of phlegmatia cerelia dolens. This is a picture showing a phlegmatia alba dolens. You can see the left lower limb is usually affected. So how do you assess the patient will have a develop a DVT? There is a scoring system is available, that is called Wells DVT score. This is help in calculation of clinical pretest probability. So in this includes active cancer, there is a given a 1 score, paralysis or immobilization of lower limb given a 1 score, immobilization previous 4 days 1 score, entire leg swollen 1 score, calf swollen for more than 3 centimeter score is given 1, pitting edema 1 score, collateral superficial vein non-varicose score is 1, probable alternative diagnosis is a 2 score. If the both the limbs are symptomatic, score whichever limb is more severe presentation. So how do you interpret this Wells DVT score? If a score is more than 3 or equal to 3, you think there is a high risk of development of DVT. Between 1 to 2, moderate risk. Less than 1 score is the low risk of development of DVT. So how do you diagnose this deep vein thrombosis? So clinical examination alone is able to confirm only 20 to 30% of cases of DVT. So two important investigation you have to do, that is one is blood test, that is D dimer and prothrombin time with INR and imaging studies. So D dimer assay is predictive only for DVT, whereas PTINR is useful to guiding the management of the patient with known DVT were on the oral anticoagulant, that is warfarin. So what is this D-dimer? So D-dimer is a specific degradation product of cross-linked fibrin because concurrent production and breakdown of clot characterize thrombosis. Patient with thromboembolic disease usually elevated this D-dimers. So there are the three methods to measure this D-dimer. One is ELISA technique, enzyme linked immunoabsorbent assay, latex agglutation, blood agglutation test. If you take the sensitivity of D-dimer in a DVT is usually more than 80%, whereas in pulmonary embolism is more than 95%. This D-dimer can have a false positive results occur in a patient with recent surgery or trauma, recent myocardial infarction or stroke, acute infection, DIC, pregnancy or recent delivery, active collagen vascular disease or metastatic cancer. So this test is usually supports your diagnosis of DVT. This is not a confirmatory diagnosis of DVT because in other condition also this D-dimer is elevated. So imaging studies includes invasive and non-invasive. Invasive are venography and radiolabeled fibrinogen. Non-invasive techniques are ultrasound, plethysmography and MRI venography. So venography is a gold standard test to diagnose a DVT. So advantage of this venography is useful if the patient has a high clinical probability of thrombosis and negative ultrasound. Also in symptomatic patient with history of prior thrombosis in whom ultrasound is non-diagnostic. So side effect of venography is phlebitis and anaphylaxis. So radio-labeled fibrinogen. So here is radioactive isotopes is incorporated into a growing thrombus, so that this test is distinguished between the whether is glottis new or old. Plethysmography is a technique that is mercury filled strain gauzes are used continuously measure the circumference of extremities to the determine the circulatory capacities. Usually mid calf area. This is usually measured. This is a non-invasive method used to detect the venous thrombosis in this area of the body, particularly in the lower limb or mid calf area. So ultrasonography, that is duplex ultrasonography, is a combination of Doppler venous flow detection along with real-time beam mode imaging is the investigation choice for diagnosing venous thrombosis of limb. So this is a less expensive and easily available investigation tool for diagnosis of DVT compared to the venography. So this is the picture of ultrasonography. You can see the DVT in a blue and red area. So magnetic resonance imaging, otherwise MR venography with gadolinium contrast, is excellent imaging modality to diagnose a DVT. So detect the leg, pelvis and pulmonary thrombi and is a 97% of sensitive and 90% of specific for DVT. It also distinguishes mature from the immature clot. This MRI is safe in all the stages of pregnancy. So coming to the treatment of deep vein thrombosis, so anticoagulation therapy, that is heparin, parenteral, and oral anticoagulants, thrombolytic therapy, that is tissue plasminogen activator, surgery, that is embolectomy, open surgical embolectomy, filters you can use. Once you remove the embolectomy, there is a chance of dislodge and develop a pulmonary embolism, so you have to put a filter to the vena cava. Compression stocking, that is elastic bandaging. So elevation of limb, for local pain relief you have to give analgesic and prevent the further clotting and give prophylactic against the recurrent pulmonary emboli. So duration of anticoagulation treatment is, for cough DVT you have to give 3 months, for proximal DVT, that is iliofemoral DVT, you have to give 6 months, for upper extremity DVT, that is upper limb DVT, you have to give 3 months. Those who recurrent episodes, more than one episode, you have to give 1 year therapy. Those who DVT with malignancy, you have to give 1 year. So here you have to give 5 days, you have to give heparin, then you have to overlap with the oral anticoagulant to maintain the PTINR of 2 to 3. So usually 2.5. So thrombolytic therapy or fibrinolysis is indicated in massive iliofemoral DVT or young patient with phlegmatia alba dolens. There is a chance of limb ischemia is there. So in this, so tissue plasmogen activator is used as a fibrinolytic agent. Surgery for DVT is open surgical thrombectomy has a limited role in the management of acute DVT. So compression stocking is very important. Here is reduce the leg edema and also assist the calf muscle pump so that blood will be more pumping to the heart. So usually this stocking, compression stocking, you usually start from day 1 of the treatment. So what are the complications of DVT? One is acute pulmonary embolism, second is post-thrombotic syndrome. If this preglottis dislodged and enter to the renal vein, will cause a renal vein thrombosis. If it is go to coronary artery, it leads to the myocardial infarction. If it is go to brain, lead to the cerebrovascular accident. And if it is chronic DVT, will have a chronic venous insufficiency. So coming to the pulmonary embolism. So by definition, pulmonary thromboembolic disease is a condition in which thrombus or multiple thrombi migrate from systemic circulation, usually from deep veins of lower limb to the pulmonary vasculature. If you take the epidemiological feature of this pulmonary embolism, is the most common preventable cause of death among the hospitalized patients. If you take a USA data, so almost 2 lakhs of death occur due to the pulmonary embolism secondary to the DVT. This pulmonary embolism accounts 10% of hospital related mortality. 10% of these occurs in usually in the first hour. If you treat timely, you reduce the mortality from 30% to the less than 10%. So what are the source of emboli for this pulmonary embolism? So 85 to 90% of the cases usually originate from the lower limb, that is lower extremities, that is deep vein thrombosis of limbs. This thrombus begin site where the blood flow is turbulent, such as venous bifurcation or behind the venous wall. Most thrombi originate in the deep veins of the calf and propagate proximally to the popliteal and femoral veins. So other source of emboli includes pulmonary pelvic vein, upper extremities, or maybe also with thoracic outlet obstruction or effort thrombosis. What are the clinical feature of this pulmonary embolism? So depending upon severity, whether is mild, moderate, or severe or massive pulmonary embolism. So mild embolism patient usually may be asymptomatic or may complain mild exertional dyspnea. If it is a massive embolism, patient complains of sudden onset of breathlessness along with pleuritic chest pain, cough, and fever, even hemoptysis also. Along with patient will complaints of a lower limb swelling or pain. In severe or massive embolism, patient will have a dizziness, syncope, then collapse, and sudden death can occur because of massive pulmonary embolism. If you take the physical finding, patient in a massive pulmonary embolism will be anxious, restless, confused, stenosis. There is an unexplained tachycardia, tachypnea. There is a shock, that is hypotension, and JVPs increase. Less frequent finding on systemic examination, there is an inspiratory crepitation slip there, loud P2, that is loud S2 because of pulmonary hypertension. So rhonchi present if patient will have a bronchospasm. How do you clinical assess and score of this pulmonary thromboembolism? Here they use a modified Wells pulmonary embolism score. In this includes clinical signs scored 3, alternative diagnosis unlikely 3, if heart rate is more than 100 1.5, immobilization previous 4 days 1.5 score, previous DVT or pulmonary embolism 1.5, hemoptysis 1, malignancy that treated in the last 6 months 1. So interpretation of this of score is if a score less than 4, less likely pulmonary embolism. If score more than 4, pulmonary embolism is likely present. Come to the investigation of pulmonary embolism. So routine investigation, that is CBC, total count is increased, usually not more than 20,000. So random blood sugar, urea creatinine, prothrombin time with INR, cardiac biomarker, that is troponin level. Usually if you suspect a RV infarction or RV microinfarction, BNP, usually brain natriuretic peptide is elevated, that indicates there is a right ventricular strain and stretching of the RV muscle, which indicates there is a patient will have a poor prognosis. Arterial blood gas analysis shows there is hypoxia, decrease oxygen with hypocapnia, decrease carbon dioxide with normal alveolar arterial oxygen gradient. So D dimers are increased, it supports your diagnosis. If you take a ECG, there is a non-specific changes you can see, that T wave changes, STT abnormality you can see, sinus tachycardia, right axis deviation, right bundle branch block with right ventricular hypertrophy and strain pattern. These are all indicate there is a pulmonary hypertension due to the pulmonary embolism. Most characteristic feature of this ECG finding in pulmonary embolism is S1 Q3 T3 pattern. specific for pulmonary embolism, only seen in minority of the patients. So this is the ECG of a pulmonary embolism, where you can see a sinus tachycardia, the S1 Q3 T3. Chest X-ray, most of the patient with pulmonary embolism will have a abnormal but non-specific chest X-ray finding. Common radiographic findings are includes atelectasis, that is collapse, pleural effusion, pulmonary infiltrates, and mild elevation of hemidiaphragm. So classical finding of pulmonary infarction are Hampton's hump or decreased vascularity, that is Wester Mark sign, are suggestive but infrequent. Hampton humps which refer to dome-shaped pleural basal density in a lung. Paula sign is a prominent pulmonary artery that it can be caused either by the pulmonary hypertension or by a distension of vessel because of large pulmonary embolus. Westermarck sign are peripheral oligemia. In some patients, normal chest radiography, otherwise unexplained acute dyspnea or hypoxemia, also suggestive of pulmonary embolism. So this is the X-ray of a patient with pulmonary embolism. You can see a peripheral oligemia, that is Wester Marker sign. So second X-ray showing there is a pleural basal density above the diaphragm, that is Hampton's hump. This is the X-ray showing there is the enlarged pulmonary artery, that is Paula's sign, because of large embolus that is obstructing the pulmonary artery. Come to the echocardiogram. So presence of unexplained RV ventricular, right ventricular volume or pressure overload, one should suspect there is a possible embolism. So that you have to confirm the further investigation. Transesophageal echocardiography has a better sensitivity and specificity, especially in case of proximal embolus, reaching up to 90% compared to the 50% of transthoracic echo. So echocardiography finding are RARB dilated, RB hypokinesia, moderate to severe pulmonary arterial hypertension is seen. Another sign you can see in echocardiography is McConnell sign, usually indirect sign of pulmonary embolism on transthoracic echocardiography. Here is there is a hypokinesis of RV free wall with normal or hyperkinetic motion of RV apex. So other investigations are ventilation perfusion scan is useful in patient with moderate to high clinical suspicion of pulmonary embolism, where contrast is avoided. CT chest with IV contrast is the principal imaging test for diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. In this, we can visualize sixth order branches also with high resolution. This CT scan also provide an excellent four-chamber view of heart. You can see the right ventricle hypokinesia or right ventricle structure of heart. And also you can make an alternative diagnosis if you don't find any signs of pulmonary embolism. You can find out either pneumonia or COPD or pulmonary fibrosis or even malignancy of lung also you can identify with help of CT chest. So pulmonary angiography is a gold standard test to diagnose a pulmonary embolism. The finding in pulmonary angiography are filling defect and abrupt cut-off vessel. How will you do this pulmonary angiography? Catheter is inserted in the right ventricle and dye is injected to the pulmonary trunk, and you observe the filling defect or abnormal cut-off under fluoroscopy. So limitation of this pulmonary angiography requires experimentation in study performance and interpretation, is an invasive technique, high mortality due to procedure itself. So this is a picture showing a pulmonary angiography where you can see a multiple emboli in the various area you can see. Come to the treatment of pulmonary embolism. So mainstay of therapy is anticoagulation. If it is not, then go for thrombolytic or fibrinolytic therapy. Surgery is indicated, that is pulmonary embolectomy and pulmonary thromboendarterectomy. So IV filter is for prevention of this pulmonary embolism. So anticoagulation is common use anticoagulation therapy are unfractionated heparin, low molecular heparin, fondaparinux, and oral anticoagulants. So unfractionated heparin or mechanism of action is binds to the enzyme inhibitor, that is antithrombin 3, that result in activation, then inactivate the thrombin. Dosage is 80 units per kg or 5000 units IV bolus, followed by continuous infusion of 18 units per kg per hour or 1000 to 1500 units per hour. So monitoring, that is you have to monitor with activated partial thromboplastin time. You have to check 6 hours after the bolus and adjust according to. Therapeutic range for this APTT target is 2 to 3 times of upper limit of reference range. It's usually equivalent to the 60 to 80 seconds. So you have to repeat APTT every 6th hourly until 2 consecutive APTT should be therapeutic. That is, you have to reach 60 to 80 seconds. Thereafter, you have to monitor every 24 hours along with hematocrit and platelet. So disadvantage of this unfractionated heparin are achieving the target APTT is very difficult. You have to monitor frequently. So dose adjustment is done every 4 to 6 hours, and there is a chance of heat, that is heparin induced thrombocytopenia. Come to the low molecular heparin. So at present there is a 3 low molecular heparin preparation are available to treat the pulmonary embolism. One is enoxaparin, dose of 1 mg per kg twice daily. Deltaparin 100 units per kg twice daily. Tinzaparin 175 units per kg once daily. So advantages compared to the unfractionated heparin is greater availability, more predictable dose response, longer half-life than the unfractionated heparin. There is no need to monitoring or dose adjustment needed unless patient is a marked obesity or renal insufficiency. Third parental anticoagulant is fondaparinux, is a synthetic pentasaccharide. It's the first new class in antithrombotic agent. This specifically inhibits the activated factor 10th. So dose is depending upon the weight. If you less than 50 kg 5 mg, 50 to 100 kg 7.5 mg, more than 100 kg so 10 mg you you have to give once daily subcutaneously. So oral anticoagulants includes warfarin. This is a vitamin K antagonist, interfere with the hepatic synthesis of vitamin K dependent coagulant factor, that is factor 2, 7, 9 and 10th, along with protein CS and Z. So full effect of warfarin requires at least 5 days. Dose is 2 to 10 milligram per kg, 2 to 10 milligram per day orally. Dose must be individuals adjusted according to the PTINR to maintain 2 to 3. So usually 2.5. So here you have to overlap the heparin for at least 5 days to counteract the early procoagulant effect of unopposed warfarin. Because this warfarin effect will take 5 days to act. So in between that, so you have to overlap the heparin so that heparin will be overtaking the 5 days. After that, this warfarin will be acting. So duration of therapy. So pulmonary embolism of first episode with reversible risk factor following surgery or trauma, 3 to 6 months of therapy is required. So lifelong treatment is usually indicated in unprovoked first episode where there is no identified risk factor or low risk of bleeding. Pulmonary embolism with malignancy, recurrent pulmonary embolism, that is more than one episode. Pulmonary embolism with antithrombin 3 deficiency or protein C and S deficiency, you have to give lifelong treatment. Otherwise, 3 to 6 months is enough. Thrombolytic therapy, that is fibrinolysis, is indicated in a patient with pulmonary embolism who presented hemodynamic compromise, or patient who develop a hemodynamic compromise during conventional therapy with heparin, or patient with embolism associated with intracavitary right heart thrombi. Common thrombolytic agents that is used are streptokinase, recombinant tissue plasminogen activator, and urokinase. So streptokinase are doses 2,50,000 units IV, say IV bolus loading dose over 30 minutes, followed by 1 lakh units per hour for 24 hours. Urokinesis 4,400 units per kg body weight IV has a loading dose over 10 minutes, followed by 4,400 units per kg per hour for 24 hours. Commonly used drug is tissue plasminogen activator, that is alteplase, 100 mg IV over 2 hours. IVC filter, that is inferior vena cava filters. These are the tinny umbrella like device inserted into the vein to catch the blood clots and stop them moving up into the lung when allowing a blood flow to the continue. Usually this is inserted in inferior vena cava. So indication of this IVC filter are those who contraindication of anticoagulants. Patient is active bleeding. In that situation, IVC filter are contraindicated, are indicated. Massive pulmonary embolism who survived, that is recurrent, may be fatal. So recurrent pulmonary thromboembolism despite of adequate anticoagulation. Those who have large free floating thrombus in iliofemoral vein following surgical catheter embolectomy. So IVC filter is indicated in contraindication of anticoagulants. Massive pulmonary embolism surveyed, then recurrent thromboembolism despite of adequate anticoagulation, and large free floating thrombus in major vein. So complication of this IVC filter is caval thrombosis, that is inferior vena cava or superior vena cava thrombosis that leads to bilateral marked limb swelling. Surgical treatment includes pulmonary embolectomy is indicated with those who have persistent hypotension, shock or cardiac arrest, who either failed thrombolysis or contraindication to the thrombolytic agent. It has been also advocated in patients who are high risk of paradoxical embolism and who are not candidate for thrombolytic, although further validation for this indication is needed. Let's come to the complication of pulmonary embolism. Sudden cardiac death can occur, can go for shock, then pulseless electrical activity, arrhythmia like atrial ventricular, secondary pulmonary arterial hypertension, car pulmonary, severe hypoxia, right to left intracardiac shunt, and lung infarction. So these are the questions you have to answer and mail within 3 days to the department mail. Thanking you.